What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and for today's video we'll be talking about the Grand Mafia on formations. And a lot of people have been asking me to create a video to explain formations, and I'll try my best to let you know how formations work, what to use, how do you use it to attack people, and how do you use it defensively. And I'll also be showing you some examples of some of my past raids and also raids that other people do, and compare it to how it relates to the formation. So before I begin on several examples of the raids, of course we just have to look at how formations work. So altogether there are 6 different types of formations, and you can categorize them according to troops and also if they are a square or a wedge formation. So let's start with the square formation first. What the square formation does is that all the troops at the front will take most of the damage, and usually these kind of formations you can either lose more troops or you can either kill more troops. So for each formation there are 4 different types of units that you can see. There are 4 bruiser entity that is within this bruiser square, and of course right behind the bruisers there are the biker formation, which is like 2 at the left and 2 at the right, and of course at the back there are 4 units of hitman. So usually that's how formations work. There are always 4 units of each bruiser, hitman and bikers. However, for the wedge formation, the front 4 units is being divided. So example, for the bruiser wedge, the first 2 that will be encountering the enemy first will be the bruiser, followed by the next 2, which is the hitman. Generally the wedge formation is much more defensive, because later on you can see the raid reports where the troop loss is quite almost equally divided among the different troop type, like bruiser, hitman and biker, if you are using a mixed formation or mixed raid or defense. And why usually people use the hitman square? Because hitman is the only troop type that will start attacking whichever formation from a further distance. So hitman will usually attack first the enemy formation, followed by the bikers or the bruisers, which are more like melee units. Yeah, so all in all, the square formation is generally used for a more like offensive, or if you want to kill more enemy units, you will use the square formation. However, you need to make sure that you are able to counter your enemy's defenses, because the square formation also means that you are able to lose more units. Formations aside, it is very important to note that combat stats is an even higher priority, and formations can only help you like just this far. If you are less powerful in your stats, if you are good with formations, they can certainly help you, but if the combat stats are horrendous, even formations can't really save you from a very strong raid leader. So this is just a disclaimer that I have to put out there, that formations can only help you until a certain level, and you cannot really beat crazy whale players. Even if you got the correct formation, you just cannot, your combat stats just cannot win against whatever formation that your opponent has. So with this, let's dig a little deeper into formations, and I'll touch on the attacking aspect first. For this, it will be the single troop type offensive strategy, which people usually like put in like full bruisers, hitmen or bikers. So there's actually a way, or like a formation stance, where you should use when you use a single troop raid. I will let you know the theory of why people use those formations, and I'll show you an example of an actual raid using these formations. The most important thing to note for single troop raid is the unit right at the back of the formation. So for example, bruiser square, it's the hitman that's right behind the formation. Hitman square is the bikers, and biker square are the bruisers. So for example, if you want to use a full hitman raid, you should be using a bruiser square formation, or if it's a wedge formation, you should use the biker wedge, because these hitmans are right at the back of the formation. So what this does in an actual raid is that the bikers or the bruisers in front of your hitman will be able to take some damage from the enemy forces raid. So this will allow you to lose fewer amount of troops, because the full brunt of the enemy forces will not be targeting whichever single troop type you will be sending first. And the biggest mistake that you can make is, for example, if you are using a full hitman raid, to go with a hitman square or hitman wedge, because your Hitman is definitely gonna take a lot of the damage from enemy forces, and that's not what you want to do. So for single troop type, always make sure to look at the troops at the back. So for Hitman Square, you should be raiding with a full biker's raid with some Hitman and some bruisers inside a raid. And I'll show you an example of how this raid works. Yeah, so for example, for this raid, the dude versus Snoop Dogg, and the dude basically had a full bruiser raid with some Hitman and bikers, and the formation that he used was Hitman Wedge. Because for Hitman Wedge, the bruisers are at the back of the formation, so whichever like Hitman and bikers in front of the bruisers were able to tank some damage that is taken from the opposing force. So with this, let's take a look at the raid. So as you can see, the bruisers are at the back and the Hitman and bikers are at the front to tank some of the enemy's damage. And what this does is that it really kind of like cushions the impact for your single troop raid, and you will lose fewer troops. Yeah, so even though I think the opponent has better combat stats, but because of the formation and you're able to fully buff your single troop type, which in turn gives stronger attack, HP and defense for a single troop, you are able to defeat a mixed defensive or offensive raid from your enemy. Yeah, so this is one example, and I think the stats for the defender side is stronger than the attacker side. Yeah, so I got a couple of other examples. For example, here in this raid, Scorpion used a full bruiser attack, a full bruiser raid. So he used a Hitman Wedge formation because the bruisers are at the back. So there are also more examples I can give. For example, for this raid, which is quite a while back, Excessive used a full Hitman raid, and for Bruiser Square, the Hitman is right at the back of the formation. So this is how you use formations as an offensive strategy for like single troop attacks. You have to make sure that based on the formations, the last row of the unit is the unit that you want to attack with. Now I'll show you a little bit more complicated, which is the mixed troops raid. And I have a couple of examples where I defended against a couple of raids for the faction tower, and over here I've won the raid, and I decided to use a wedge formation because I want to reduce troop loss. That's why I decided to go for wedge formation. And it's also important to know which unit type your enemy is sending, and I have just right enough time to change my formation, because what my enemy did was to send a full bruiser raid, and what I want is the bikers right in front of the raid so that the bikers can attack the bruisers at full force, which will help me win this defense. And another mistake that the attacker made was to have set his raid as a bruiser wedge formation. So what this does is that, as you can see, the cannon folder of the Hitman and biker won't really help because bruisers will be right in front of the raid for the bruiser formation. So you can see how the formation really kind of like didn't really help, because it set bruiser wedge, the bruisers are right at the front of the attack against my biker formation, and you can see how the Hitman and biker didn't really absorb the damage because they only lost like 1 unit out of the 5 units that he sent. So it doesn't really help that he raided with a full bruiser but decided to go for a bruiser wedge formation, which makes him a little more vulnerable. And I'll give another example of another raid which I kind of lost. So for this raid, this person sent a full biker against my mixed troops, and what he did correctly was that he set it at a Hitman Square. And what Hitman Square does is that, as you can see, the bikers are right at the back of the formation, which means that the Hitman and the bruisers are able to tank some of the damage, and the bikers are a little more safe and will be able to attack my army at full force. Especially it's a square formation, so it is definitely more deadly and deals more damage, even though he can lose more troops. And because he's able to set his formation correctly, he's able to lose fewer troops. And other than that, because I was using a bruiser biker gear, my Hitman attack or Hitman stats weren't very good. Even though I was kind of like in a okay formation, I used a Hitman wedge because I wanted to counter his full biker's raid. It didn't really help much. Like I mentioned earlier, combat stats is important, and for this raid I did not have any Hitman gear on, so I definitely took a lot of damage from this raid. And the third example again with the same person, he decided to go for a full bruiser raid, and what he did was that he set it at the Hitman Wedge, which means that the bruisers will be safeguarded by the Hitman and the bikers in front of the formation. And because for this raid my combat gear is mediocre, I decided to equip sort of like a 333 gear, so I don't really have any troops stats that really stood out, so this in turn made me lose the raid sadly. And lastly, I want to touch on the most important aspect, which is the Hitman Square, and why Hitman Square is usually the most sought after formation that you should be using against your enemies. And over here you can see that even though the Hitman and Biker should be able to tank the damage, but not all the Hitman from this raid died, because as I mentioned before, Hitman attacks from a distance. So number one, they are able to attack the enemy faster, and number two, your other bruisers and bikers are able to help you take more damage from your Hitman. And I'm going to show you an example how this Hitman really helps to kill more enemies even though you are not really putting a lot of Hitman. So for this raid is mostly bikers, but there's quite a number of Hitman as well. So if you look at this raid replay, you can see that the Hitman at the front starts to attack the enemies immediately and also tanking some of the damage from the full bikers raid. Yep, so if you could just imagine for like mentioned raids, or if you're defending from enemies using a Hitman square, your Hitmans are able to attack immediately when your enemy comes, and then your bruisers and biker can kind of like tank some of the damage. So Hitman square is quite a better strategy to use to defend against enemy forces if let's say you're offline or you don't have enough time to react to whichever troops your enemy is sending. You should stay at Hitman square. Based on my knowledge and opinion, there might be a better way, but for me actually Hitman square is one of the safer ways. So in summary, I've given you some insights on how you can use single troops raid to your advantage by using the correct formation, and also what kind of formation you should use to defend your turf. Yep, and this is how I use some of the formation to my advantage. I'm not sure if there's any more I should be adding, but if there's any new news, I'll create a video on it to help you understand what other things that formations can help you win your battles. And I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys again real soon.